girls exploited in domestic work and commercial sex. Now, earlier this year, government allocated 1 million cedis to the Human Trafficking Fund to support victim rescue, rehabilitation, and prevention. Yet in the 2026 mid-year budget review, there was no update on the status of that fund. Now, ICEDEG Africa says that Omission raises serious questions about transparency, accountability, and whether Ghana is given enough priority to one of its most vulnerable populations. So was this simply a reporting oversight, or does it point to a deeper policy problem? We'll be joined by Kwasi Asuman-Frimpong. He's Advisory Council Chairman of ICEDEG Africa. Here this morning on the ABS. All right, so let's get on to the phone lines now. Kwasi Asuman-Frimpong, Advisory Council Chairman, ICEDEG Africa, is my guest on the phone lines now. Thank you, sir. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great, and good morning to you and your listeners.
Great. Now, let's talk about the concern you've raised. Why does this really matter at all?
Yes, so this has become necessary, and the reason why it matters to ICEDEG is that there have been an increasing spate of trafficking and child labor-related issues in West Africa in recent times, ranging from different aspects of social vices, where people are trafficked using different means to traffic people. So, for instance, there is a football recruitment scam where people come parading themselves as agents of football clubs or agents for players, recruit young people, unsuspecting young people, and go and dump there in other parts of the world without any support for them. And then there is the QNet scam that is all over the space in the West African subregion, recruiting people from far and near to different places under the guise of either taking them to the Western world or taking them to the Gulf countries. And even also for the Gulf countries, there is this trafficking situation on our hands where over the years, the government and individuals are called upon to go and rescue our people, our young girls who have been trafficked to the Gulf countries and have been molested and used for all sorts of things. And then internally, we have the issues of young people who are trafficked into illegal mining, who are trafficked into illegal fishing, who are trafficked into farming activities. And these people find themselves in a whole lot of hazardous activities that are beyond their age and health, engaged in child labor activities and all of those things. And so because of that, and to deal with some of these issues, that is why as a state, in 2005, we enacted the Human Trafficking Act. And when we enacted the Human Trafficking Act to deal with the exigencies of trafficking, we put in that act a Human Trafficking Fund to, among other things, deal with child labor issues, help in rescuing trafficked people. When trafficked people are rescued, there's a transition period. They should be sheltered at a particular government facility before they are eventually reintegrated into their family, and a whole lot of things. There's the Human Trafficking Secretariat under the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection. And since 2005, what we've been doing as a country is to make sure that we allocate resources to the Human Trafficking Fund, whilst the fund also attracts resources from some donor support and civil society and NGOs. This year, in the budget statement itself, the government economic policy and budget statement, read in November for the 2026 budget year or finance year, 1 million Ghana cedis was allocated for the fund. And I must put on record that this 1 million Ghana cedi allocation has become more like a norm in recent times, almost for like 3-4 years now, every year we allocate 1 million. That in and of itself is inadequate. But beyond the inadequacy is the point of the differences between, or the intersection between allocation and disbursement. Government does the allocation, but as to how we disburse this amount, as to whether the fund gets it, becomes challenging. Our independent checks, as ICEDEG indicates, that in the early part of the year, a portion of the amount was disbursed by the Controller and Accountant General to the fund. An infinitesimal portion. I do not have the figure of it, but an infinitesimal portion. Since then, nothing has been disbursed into the amount. And so one would have expected that as the minister came to account to us, give us an assessment of the performance of the 2026 budget in the Mid-Year Fiscal Policy review. One would have expected that as the minister touted the disbursement, allocations, and utilization to the District Assembly Common Fund, disbursement, allocation, and utilization of other statutory funds, the GET Fund, 3 years HS, no stress-free, whatever, the big push agenda, Kumasi Expressway. As the minister came to do this fantastic accounting to the state, then you would have expected the minister to also tell us practically how much of the 1 million Ghana cedis that was allocated to the trafficking fund to deal with trafficking issues, to deal with child labor issues, to deal with human rights issues, how much of it have been disbursed by the Controller and Accountant General, how, or by the ministry, also how has been the utilization and how is it going? Some way, somehow, sadly, there was a loud silence of the minister on this. No statement whatsoever, not a single word whatsoever was mentioned about this. Not only was nothing said about the Human Trafficking Fund as a fund, but also there was no mention whatsoever about how, as a country, we are financing child labor, as financing and fighting child labor. There was no mention whatsoever about human rights related issues and how, as a country, we are committing resources to it. Our point as ICEDEG is that the macroeconomics are good, and it is good to have very good macroeconomic indicators. But the macroeconomic indicators are meaningless if they do not inure to the socio-economic development of the ordinary Ghanaian and do not safeguard the vulnerable population of our country. And the vulnerable population of our country are also the people who a lot of the time are susceptible to trafficking. They are susceptible to trafficking, and these are young people, children, women, and people who are in dire needs of job, who fall prey to recruitment scams and all of those things. And that's why for us, we thought it wise to raise it. Now,
but do you believe this was simply an administrative oversight, or it suggests a deeper problem with government commitment to tackling human trafficking?
I believe it's both. I would want to, first of all, give the minister the benefit of the doubt. That this is a genuine oversight. Even though before the presentation of the budget, ICEDEG had presented a 5-point recommendation to the minister to consider in the Mid-Year Fiscal Policy review. 5-point recommendation. In that 5-point recommendation that we had made to the minister, we had actually talked about this particular thing. But then we can still give the minister of the benefit of the doubt and assume that it was an oversight. The second part, too, is that consistently as a country, we've not paid much attention to human trafficking issues in this country. We've not paid much attention to human rights issues, child labor issues, and all of those things. If you go into the activities of the Gender, Children and Social Protection, you'll notice that a lot of the funding for the dealing with trafficking in the country, dealing with child labor, comes from donor partners. A lot of the time, they do not come from state resources. But as a state, we cannot continue to depend on people to take care of our vulnerable people for us. The state has a responsibility. There is something we call legal paternity. The state has that responsibility to act as the father of the people. And in acting as the father of the people, protect every single individual in the state, including vulnerable people. However, consistently and systematically, we have not paid critical attention to this critical part of our country. And that's why I say that it's both. There's a real challenge. With how we are protecting vulnerable people in this country, trafficking. And that is why QNET and all of those recruitment camps keep on triumphing, because then they are easily able to get other people. But I also want to think that maybe, let's give the minister a benefit of the doubt, it was an oversight. But significantly, though, is that once it is an oversight, our point is that it goes beyond, the omission goes beyond just a mere reporting gap. This morning, you and I are talking about the budget. Since Thursday up until this morning, almost all major media organizations have been discussing their budget. Parliament would today start discussing the budget. Civil society organizations and the entire country will be talking about the budget. That is the Mid-Year Fiscal Policy review. And that is why such an omission is worrying. Because what it means is that if this had been mentioned in the Mid-Year Fiscal Policy review, then all of these conversations would have come up.
Okay.
Then as a country, by this time, among other things, we would also be talking about human trafficking. Among other things, we would also be talking about child labor. Among other things, we would also be talking about Human Trafficking Fund. Parliament, in exercising its oversight responsibility this morning, as they discussed the budget, would have been talking about this. Unfortunately, it's not in the budget. And so now it limits Parliament's oversight responsibility. It limits broad-based conversation about the issue and how to deal with this critical aspect of our life as a country. It limits even the donor partners, their efforts to identify how much as a country we are committing to this. And so it takes away the total leadership in the conversation, where the state takes leadership in discussing child labor, human rights, human trafficking issues. That statal responsibility is taken out because of this reporting gap. And that is why we are saying that it may be a reporting gap, but this mere reporting gap or this omission needs to be addressed. And the reason why we thought it right, that let's bring it out to the banner.
Right. If you just join us, Dr Kwasi Asuman-Frimpong is Advisory Council Chairman, ICEDEG Africa. Nana, let's look at the policy paper itself. Your statement argues that this omission goes beyond reporting. From a public finance and governance perspective, what should the mid-year budget review have included? Again, why was it so important, or why is it so important for statutory funds such as Human Trafficking Fund to be specifically accounted for in a fiscal policy review?
All right, thank you once again. And like I already indicated, the minister took time to discuss the business to various statutory funds, to the District Assembly Common Fund, to the Ghana Education Trust Fund, to the No Stress Free Fund, and then also other government priority programs. The minister took time to discuss them. The Human Trafficking Fund is not a discretionary fund. And I repeat, the Human Trafficking Fund is not a discretionary fund. It is a statutory fund with statutory standing, just as the District Assembly Common Fund, just as the GET Fund, and every other state fund. It is a creation by an act of Parliament, the Human Trafficking Act 2005. So since it is a creation by an act of Parliament, again, in the main budget statement, as I already indicated, read in November, 1 million Ghana cedis was allocated to the fund. As to how far disbursement has gone, it is unclear. Now, what this means is that if the minister finds it prudent to account to the states disbursements, allocations, and utilizations of other statutory funds, such as the DACF, such as the GET Fund, and all of those other funds, important as they may, then we are thinking that no other statutory fund should be eliminated from the conversation. More so at a time where trafficking issues have become hot on the banner, and more so at a time where our young people and women continue to be vulnerable and susceptible to a whole lot of trafficking scams across the West African sub-region, and then also in Ghana. And then more so at a time where the United States is reporting on trafficking issues in West Africa, and particularly mentioning Ghana. And if you look at our report, besides the U.S. Department of State report about trafficking in Ghana. So we think that important trafficking is also an issue that deserves national attention, just as any other thing. We do not intend to diminish any statutory fund that was discussed in the budget. That is not what we intend to do. All that we are saying is that we can chew Ghana and work at the same time. And so we can discuss the ACF and at the same time discuss Human Trafficking Fund. Importantly, the state has the responsibility to protect its vulnerable people. Its vulnerable people being people who are susceptible to trafficking. Aside the fact that the state has a responsibility to protect its people, the state also has a responsibility to bring all relevant issues to the banner for national conversation. One of the importance of a mid-year fiscal policy review, that is for the reason why the Public Financial Management Act provides that the minister does this by the end of the second quarter of every year, is so that we are able as a country to know how much as a state we've expended from our budget allocation, and then also to discuss critical and key issues. And so this morning, and since Thursday up until now, every media organization is discussing key issues that came up from the fiscal policy review. Parliament would this morning, as I've already indicated, be discussing provisions in the Mid-Year Fiscal Policy Review. Now that is the state leading a starter discussion on relevant aspects of our economy and of our lives as a country. Unfortunately, a very important aspect of our life is missing. And so it limits Parliament oversight responsibility on that score. If not for the fact that ICEDEG decided to bring this up, and as I say, graciously has decided to take this up, then human trafficking issue wouldn't have been a topic for discussion this morning. This morning, we would have, from the budget, we would have been discussing no stress-free fees. We would have been discussing Big Push. We would have been discussing Accra-Kumasi Expressway. We would have been discussing disbursement and allocations and disbursement to District Assembly Common Fund. At what point in time do we talk about a pressing issue of human trafficking? At what point in time do we talk about young people who are trafficked and are engaged in child labor, engaged in illegal fishing, engaged in illegal mining, instead of getting education, who are used in our farms, in our various farms, cocoa farm, cashew farm, and all of those other farms, instead of they going to school, getting the knowledge and becoming like my good friend who is interviewing me now, or becoming like me, who I am speaking to you.
Okay.
That conversation to talk about all of these individuals are missing, because some way, somehow, there was an omission of this critical aspect of our life as a country. From our Mid-Year Fiscal Policy Review, whose intendment, the Mid-Year Policy Review, whose intendment is to bring to the banner and to the fore how government, for the past 6 months, has spent our money, how government, and what government intends. Now, we do not know how much government has committed, aside the fact that 1 million was allocated. Now, we do not know how much out of that 1 million has been properly been allocated to the fund.
Your findings,
to the fund.
Your findings are indicating that only the first quarter release appears to have been made. How did you arrive at that conclusion?
That was based on our independent checks. So the independent checks tells us that the first quarter tranche had been made. had been disbursed. Now the budget statement, the mid-year policy review, was read at the time that the second quarter tranche should have been disbursed. We do not know. Again, our findings doesn't tell us specifically for the first quarter how much was disbursed. We do know that at least something was disbursed. We were expecting that the minister would have told us that, okay, so for the first quarter, we disbursed this amount to the Human Trafficking Fund. The Human Trafficking Fund for the first quarter has spent the amount on this, and that programs. And this is what we intend to disburse to them. Just as he did with DSCF, when he told us that about 80% of DSCF has been disbursed to the district assemblies. So now we know that at least about 80% of DSCF has been disbursed to the district assembly. Just as we were told that some amount is disbursed to the big push. So now we know that money has gone to the big push. And we know that what big push is doing when he mentions that about 80 contracts have been given, about 13 contracts are currently projects are currently ongoing, and all of those conversations. And this is basically what we are saying. So the omission denies us this conversation, practically so-called.
Right. Now, so if subsequent releases have indeed not been made, what practical impact, does that have on victims and frontline agencies? Should Ghanaians also know how every cedi is spent and what outcomes it delivers?
First of all, we lose nothing.
Yeah.
If as a state and in the interest of accountability,
yes,
every cedi spent, every person spent is told us. We lose nothing as a state. And in fact, that is one of the policy rationale behind why as a country we passed the Public Financial Management Act, so that the ministry will account to us every cedi, every peso that is spent from our resources. And so if the state decides to account for every cedi, every peso spent, we lose nothing. That is it. Now, how does it affect the work of the
victims
involved?
and the frontline agencies?
Yes. It needs stating that as the accounts will say, how when you look at the frontliners, the people who are engaged in the frontline rescue, you have police officers in there, you have officials from the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection in there, you have officials from the Human Trafficking Secretariat in there, and all of those ones, right? They engage in a laborious and an expensive venture of rescuing. Imagine a trafficker who is able to traffic 300 people from Ghana in the name of QNet to US. Such a person will be so rich that if he comes to Ghana to engage in his nefarious activity, he can afford probably the most expensive hotel in Ghana. Now, if you are sending frontliners to go and follow up on this individual and eventually arrest him and rescue the kids, that's a lot of money. Without the money, there is nothing to help these individuals to go out there and work. If you rescue people, for instance, QNet, a story that ICEDEG was following, where QNet lured some young women from Sierra Leone, told them they were sending them to Canada, and brought them to Ghana. They told them they were sending them to Ghana, but they brought them to Ghana. Now, when such people are rescued, they will first have to be sheltered. They become the responsibility of Ghana that we shelter them before Ghana communicates to the embassy or the High Commissioner of Sierra Leone for them to intervene, to take their citizens, to send them. Before this happens, the searching part is the responsibility of Ghana. We need money for that searching processes. The people you put there, medication, they will need medication, they'll have to be fed and all of those things. Again, when you have rescued people and you have even been able to eventually send them back to their parents, there should be a practical reintegration program. There should be a practical reintegration program that demands resources. Again, there should be, you see, the question is that there are 3 P's involved in dealing with trafficking: protection, prosecution, and prevention. How do we prevent it? One of the means by which we prevent is to constantly engage in national advocacy and national education. Educating people from across the length and breadth of this country demands resources. In the absence of resources, all of these things that I've indicated, they come to naught. Government then is unable to effectively, or the secretariat and individuals involved, frontliners involved, are unable to practically handle trafficking issues. And that is why it is important that we know that how much has been disbursed to the fund. Beyond the fund, though, holistically as a country, how much have we committed to financing trafficking issues, financing child labor prevention issues, financing human rights related issues? These are real issues. These are everyday life issues that are affecting every Ghanaian. That as a country we should not lose sight of. And that as a country we must take responsibility for. And that is the whole point. And that's why I'm saying that when you look at the relevance and the relevance of the trafficking fund, the relevance of child labor protection, the relevance of human rights advocacy and all of those things, I want to give the minister the benefit of the doubt that it may just have been a mere oversight. It may, because I do not think that the minister will consider all of this relevant and intentionally omit it. So I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. But if in giving him the benefit of the doubt, it does not erase or take away from us as a country the fact that the omission goes a long way to affect the fight against human trafficking, to affect the fight against child labor, to affect the fight against human rights abuses in this country. And our vulnerable population continue to suffer for this. And as a country, we may have very good macroeconomic indicators, very solid. We love it that the minister is giving us these macroeconomic indicators. But those macro indicators will be meaningless if it is not linked to the protection of the vulnerable population of the country.
Okay, all right. We're going to wrap up shortly because of time. But how serious is human trafficking in Ghana today, Nana?
All right. So human trafficking has become a very big thing, particularly in recent times, as elaborately indicated. Now, when you check a number of, so you deal with it from the international space and then the local space.
Yeah.
It has economic implications, social implications, and national security implications. Now, how prevalent has it become in recent times? In recent times, you have seen an upsurge in QNet activities, where these QNet people come to Ghana, lure young people in the name of recruitment, i.e. recruitment camp, tell them we are sending you to the Western world and dump them in other African countries and then subject them to inhuman activities. Constantly on a daily basis, we are recording huge numbers. We are recording huge numbers. When you look at the data from the Human Trafficking Unit of Ghana Police Service, and then also from the Human Trafficking the Secretariat of the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection, you notice that the number of people who are trafficked by QNet is off the roof. Another type of trafficking that constantly we are recording in this country, and constantly as a country, we need to spend resources to go and rescue them. Are vulnerable young women who are trafficked into the Gulf states. And especially in the era of wars in the Gulf states, it even become more worrying. But constantly we are hearing recorded incidents of young people in this country who are being trafficked to the Gulf states. Again, traffickers use human trafficking for a whole lot of illegal activities, including money laundering, including so many of them, killing, murder, and all of those things. And this is at the international level. At the local level, constantly as a country, we are trafficking people into Ghana from outside of Ghana to go into fraud begging. And so when you drive across the streets of Africa, there are so many young people across the streets of Africa, Ghana, who are into begging, who ordinarily had no intention of coming to beg. They were either trafficked by some people from the rural areas or from outside of the country and forced into begging. We have people who are trafficked to come to Ghana and engage in prostitution. We have people who are trafficked from rural communities and sent to the Volta Lake and other river bodies to go and engage in hazardous illegal fishing activities. Illegal mining activities across the country not long ago, before I came in, you were having conversation on that. Yeah. Go to our illegal mining areas. You notice a number of young people who have been trafficked to go and engage in illegal mining activities. You go to our farming communities, particularly our cocoa growing areas. And let's not forget, not long ago, the European Union was threatening Ghana about our cocoa. Now, when the threat about our cocoa came, two things were important about the threat. One has to do with the fact that we are not doing much as a country to prevent young people who are trafficked into cocoa production. That is one. Beyond, and then the second one has to do with the presence of heavy metals as a result of illegal mining in our food products, including cocoa. But the part of the trafficking children, now our cocoa is even at the verge of being rejected because of young people who are trafficked to go in there. And so every facet of our life, economically, socially, and security-wise, we are threatened as a country. Right. Constantly, we are recording surges in the numbers. The numbers are not decreasing.
Right.
The frontliners are working so well. I love them so much. The police officers involved doing fantastic work. When you go to the Human Trafficking Secretariat, they are doing so much. When you look at the various development partners and NGOs, for instance, the IGM, International Justice Mission, they are all doing so much.
Okay.
The state has a responsibility and a legal paternalism to protect its vulnerable citizens.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr Kwasi Asuman-Frimpong, Advisory Council Chairman, ICEDEG Africa, for speaking to us this morning. We're grateful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the time. ICEDEG is very grateful.
All right. So that's it there. But let me say happy birthday to Brittany